Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. If you've been watching the recent videos, you'll know that while I was in Sydney, I went to Canoeland's orchard and picked a huge bag of these beautiful nectarines and a much smaller bag of candied plums. And today I thought what we would do is my own version of the Rivers Homestead Every Little Bit Counts challenge. This week I have focused on trying to get the most out of my freeze dryer. We are in summer here in Australia. So far the weather's been unusually cool, particularly at night, and I've been in winter clothes and a lot of my crops have failed to launch. So I have been buying more things from farmers markets than I had intended, although in this case, of course, I did because I don't have an orchard. I only have a tiny little residential plot, and it's in a rental accommodation, so there's a limit to what I can do. But I wanted to make the most of my freeze dryer, especially while the weather is cooler. Freeze dryers have quite a restricted optimal temperature in which they like to function to make them more efficient, and unfortunately, Australian summer is not very conducive to optimal function of a freeze dryer. So I wanted to make the most of it while we were having a cool week and try and put away as much food as I could for our long-term use going forward. I found the nectarines and particularly the plums quite difficult to cut into slices, and some of them were quite bruised after the 3-hour journey home. So what I ended up doing was pureeing a lot of the nectarines and also all of the plums. I am not a huge fan of plums, as I've said, but I thought after my experience making Ruby's birthday cake with freeze-dried fruit powders that this would be the most effective way to, number one, freeze dry a large quantity of fruit in one batch, and also to sort of prime the freeze-dried material so it was going to be easier to powder, kind of like I did with the bone broth, and then I would store it and potentially use it for things like chia pudding in the morning, or maybe I was thinking about adding the nectarines to banana bread to make banana and nectarine bread, and just kind of thinking about all the ways that I could use this. I find it so odd how when you powder a lot of freeze-dried things, they come out with like a little smoke at the top, and given how many nectarines is involved to create this much powder, as I watch that sort of smoky silt come out, I always feel like that's probably like 25 nectarines blowing away on the breeze.
You never told to no one else. Say goodbye to lonely nights last summer.
I've mentioned before that I've bought a couple of versions of these jar vacuum sealers that were supposed to be compatible with my Food Saver, and I even contacted Food Saver directly to try and get recommendations to find one that actually works with my Food Saver, and they just don't. So this is a manual one and it's working quite well so far. As you can see, the candied plum powder did not turn out as great. It still looks really wet in this video, but it's not. It's just got a lot of sugar in it, and that makes it really clumpy. But I'm also really paranoid when it comes to food preservation and wanting to make sure that I'm not wasting food or eating something that's going to give me botulism. I'm really freaked out about the idea of botulism. So the plan is to get through this pretty quickly, because I think you find the natural sugars in fruit probably mean that even though it freeze dries well to some extent, in this kind of situation, I think you find the plums are ultimately too sugary and too sticky to preserve well. I've heard the same thing about blueberries, so I haven't done a lot more blueberries, but these plums, yeah, they're pretty sticky. But to be honest, I wouldn't be depressed if I didn't eat the plums. I have found with the fruit that I have freeze dried so far, it does freeze dry better and less clumpy, and the sugars seem to be less of an issue when you actually freeze dry it when it's not 100% ripe. The nectarines weren't as ripe as the plums. The plums were very, very, very ripe. The idea behind the Every Little Bit Counts challenge is to try and do something every day to put away food and to preserve it so that you can store as much as you possibly can, particularly to make use of your own harvest. As I said, my harvest is not doing so well at the moment because of our crazy weather. So I've been working this week on getting one batch in the freezer to pre-freeze before the next batch comes out of the freeze dryer. In this case, I put the mushrooms straight in the freeze dryer. In my experience, they have done really, really well in there. I also added the broccoli that I also got from Costco and the cucumbers that I got from Costco. I was hoping to try a few different ways to freeze dry broccoli and cucumber, and I just also wanted to make sure I had loads of foods that were similar in terms of their water content. So they were the next thing to go in the freeze dryer. I hate mushrooms, but I recognize that they have a lot of medicinal qualities. So they are actually for the dogs. This is a great digestible fiber for them as well. So hopefully they will enjoy all this mushroom. Something that I had to work on over a number of days was bone broth. So as I was cycling each load in and out of the freeze dryer, I was adding a tray of bone broth and slowly accumulating 5 trays worth of bone broth. I love watching how they kind of crackle and pop up off the trays as they dry. It's really fun to watch bone broth, and it is really cool to have powdered bone broth. So this batch was actually not for my pantry. This was for my best friend's Christmas present. And then straight after the bone broth was done, in went a massive batch of carrots, which we also got from Costco. This was nearly 6 kilos worth of carrots, which my hands blistered cutting this. I think I must hold the knife a little bit funny, but I now have a lot of freeze-dried carrots and freeze-dried carrot powder. Obviously carrots don't have the same water content or sugar content as fruit, but I find that kind of like with the fruit, it powders better if it is diced like this. I think obviously it does dry out better if it's in smaller pieces. But yeah, I have found that if I puree some things first and freeze dry them kind of like with the bone broth or with the pureed nectarines, or I've also done some pureed mangoes, it does seem to vary how well it actually then powders. It seems that some things then still powder beautifully, like the bone broth, and some things like the plums, I don't know if it means that the sugars are more kind of dense because you end up being able to fit many more nectarines or plums or whatever in a single tray than if you powdered individually chopped pieces. I don't know if that then means that your sugars are more intense and therefore you're going to get a more clumpy product. But either way, the puppies liked the drop bits of carrot, which was amazing because little bird will not eat her vegetables, and as a raw fed dog, she does have to eat a little bit of vegetables. So it was nice to see that she'll eat crunchy carrot. She also really enjoys freeze-dried liver. So I have put up a little bit of freeze-dried liver for the puppies, mostly because I managed to get a year's supply of liver really cheap, and I don't want it all sitting in my freezer. It's pretty amazing to me that nearly 6 kilos of carrots and 5 trays in the freeze dryer becomes this much freeze-dried carrot. It's mango season, and mango season never goes long enough. So I bought 2 trays of Calypso mangoes from Costco, and they're an amazing price at Costco and such good quality mangoes. So I was delighted to get a whole big bunch done and into the freeze dryer for long-term food preservation. I had hoped to actually eat some of the mangoes before I went to Sydney, but that didn't happen. But that meant that I didn't prepare them all for the freeze dry on this occasion. I did get some of the cucumber ready that we'd also bought from Costco, and I tried to shred some because I was hoping to be able to freeze dry it for use in things like tzatziki sauce, but it was very watery, so I did actually take it off the tray after this and squeeze out some of the water and put it back in. And I tried some cucumber slices as well. That morning I had been to the farmer's market and they had these huge 1 kilo bags of peeled garlic. So I was really excited to get that ready for the freeze dryer as well, although there was very limited chance that was going to get done in this week just because a large freeze dryer seems to take on average about 30 something hours to finish a load depending on what it is. But once everything was frozen overnight, I then popped it in the freeze dryer and got things going. We were really lucky that this week actually wasn't humid. Since this week, I have tried freeze drying a tray full of pureed mango, and boy, did it absorb the moisture in the air as soon as I opened the freeze dryer on a more humid day. I chopped off the ends of the garlic and got them popped into the freezer to get ready for the next round, although as I said, this wasn't completed in the week. But to be honest, I don't know that I'll ever freeze dry garlic again. I think you definitely need to pre-dice it or puree it anyway, because it must have a thicker skin and it comes out with these like squishy, like sultanid garlic bulbs, and some are basically like hard as a rock, and it was a nightmare to get them freeze dried, and I don't even think it happened properly, and it took well over 50 hours, and it was an additional 30 hours after the machine thought it was done, and they were still like concrete, and the machine smelt like garlic even after I'd cleaned it and washed it out and done potato loads and bread loads, and it smelled like garlic for a long time, so I don't know that I'll be in a hurry to do garlic again. So that is our week with the Every Little Bit Counts challenge. I hope you guys have enjoyed hanging out with us. Thanks for watching.